All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Profit Minded Business Podcast. The point of the whole podcast is really to help small businesses in the community really learn from one another. One of the things that we've found as business owners ourselves is that we've gleaned so much from having coffees and meals and just visiting with other business owners that go through similar things. And we really wanted this podcast to be the essence of those meetings and be able to help everyone out that comes to us to find some guidance or just some insight. So welcome to the podcast. Today we are joined with Chris and Lynn. Both have got some great experiences within the family-run business arena. This is going on from our last episode, but we're going to get a little bit more specific today. Chris and his group, the Beringer Group, really help those family-run businesses create and maintain the wealth throughout the generations. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you guys do.
Well, thank you so much for having me today, Corbin. I think your series is wonderful.
Thank you.
I love business-to-business owners discussions. Thank you for being here today, Lynn. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, rags to riches to back again in 3 generations. 97% of American small businesses don't make it to the 3rd generation.
Wow.
The other 3% probably hired us. That's not entirely true. But before we get into a deeper discussion, is it all right if I give a little background about who we are and where we came from?
Absolutely.
My father started the company in 1979. We're about to have our 40th year Christmas party. I'm very excited that we've lasted that long. My father, still very active in the business, was the youngest man in the room when we started the company. When he started the company, I was 3. He had one business line only in 1979. That was to help business owners transition their company to the next generation. If you go to 1979, the majority of business owners wanted to give the company to their children.
Yeah.
And the way that he did that, and everyone laughed at him and said it was impossible, was he was going to cold call business owners who had enterprise values north of $10 million. Everyone said, you can't cold call that market. And he said, well, I'm certainly going to try. And he was certainly very successful. I know today there's a lot of different marketing techniques, but we still cold call. And I would tell all business owners that cold calling works. Certainly it's difficult and you have to have the right mentality for it, but we've done it, and that's what we've built our business on. We can talk about other marketing techniques that we use as we go on the conversation. Fast forward to 1985, the business owner's mentality changed. I don't know if it was Ronald Reagan or Michael Milken. It was Drexel Berman who brought in all the additional corporate financing. And your business owner, in 1979, if you said, how many want to keep your business and give it to the next generation, 9 would raise their hand. In 85, 5 would raise their hand, and the other 5 would say, we want to sell.
Yeah. So
we decided we needed to expand our business lines then, when we're going to be missing out on half our market. So we created a sell-side investment bank, which we could help business owners sell their company. But that started with a conversation. We'd go to business owners. We still do this today, and we'd say, do you wish to keep or sell your business? And if they wish to keep it, we could help them do that. If they wish to sell it, we could help them do that. If they didn't know what they wanted to do, and that's still a large portion of business owners, we would help them decide which direction to go into. Go to 1987, 1988, we realized one of the main reasons that businesses were failing and not moving on to the next generation was simply their product wasn't applicable anymore. Maybe the patents expired. If you look at a company like Kodak 15 years ago,
oh wow, yeah,
it's a fantastic company. You look at the advent of the iPhone. Who needs a Kodak camera anymore? I know we have some great video technicians here today, but I know a lot of people are doing things just on iPhone video. So we worked with our business owners and said, really, if you want your family wealth to survive, you should probably try to make your company look more like Berkshire Hathaway and less than General Motors. And the ways to do that are either diversify your business lines or create a separate liquid asset base. So we created an investment advisory practice of our business for the business owners. They might have a company worth $100 million, but they didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. So we created a practice where we could help them grow that asset base through investments and liquid securities. Fast forward to 1997, Our business grew to 120 people with offices nationwide, all the way out to San Francisco, down to Florida, in the middle of the country as well. We got a joint venture with First Union, who then was sold to Wachovia, who then was sold to Wells Fargo. The banking world changes a lot too. And they became such a big part of our deal flow, which I would also caution, this is from our experience, that when you get a strategic partnership with another company, make sure it doesn't become too much of your new deal flow. They were probably 85% of all our new business at that time. It was just so easy. The bankers would go to a business owner, and I imagine most business owners are listening. Most of the people listening today are business owners.
Sure.
And business owners are rarely going to refuse a meeting with their banker.
Oh yeah.
They just don't do that. They want to have that really, really good relationship.
Right.
And the joint venture was going so well, they said, we're going to buy you or build you. And we didn't really have much of a choice to sell because they became such an important part of our deal flow. They also bought, ironically, a company called Bowles Hollowell, who was strictly an M&A shop. And a year into our partnership with First Union, they said, we're going to split your planning group with your sell-side group, and we're going to segregate them into two separate divisions. You said, well, that doesn't really work for us because our whole angle and our whole approach is going to the business owner and saying, we're going to give you the options about keep or sell and help you make the correct decision. And by separating them, you're taking away those middle people that don't really know what they want to do.
Sure.
So we left. We reformed our company. I was working at AIG at the time. Me and my father joke that he bankrupted First Union and I almost bankrupted AIG, so he was a little better. But neither of their problems had anything to do with us. He called me up and said, I'm leaving First Union. As you know, we had a family liquidity event a year ago, and do you want to come help me form our family office? I said, sure. What's a family office? Effectively, a family office is a way to manage family affairs and investments. It's through tax, concierge services, estate planning, could be real estate investments, could be family philanthropy. And we went around the country and we interviewed Goldman Sachs, we interviewed Rock & Co., Northern Trust, and they all gave us these really nice presentations, told us all about family offices, all the pros and cons of insourcing versus outsourcing. And at the end of every single one of those presentations, they said, for your particular family situation, the right thing for you to do is hire us. So it wasn't really, they made it look like an objective proposal, but it wasn't an objective proposal.
Right.
So we realized that was probably a really big need in the marketplace. So we created a family office branch where we could help families determine whether they should insource or outsource their family office functionalities.
And when you maybe just clarify for the listeners the family office. So you said that it was really a high net worth family that's got all these different needs as far as go through them again. What are the different areas in which you guys function under?
They would have needs in terms of investments. They would have needs in terms of estate planning. Mm-hmm. They would have needs in terms of just regular tax planning. For instance, if you were donating securities to a charity, you would probably want someone to tell you to donate your low basis securities to a charity and not the high basis. So, and then you can certainly reset those stocks and buy them later. But you need someone to really coordinate all those different areas together. When we say family office, we really need family investment company. Mm-hmm. There are family offices that exclusively focus on concierge services, bill paying, walking the dog, stocking the refrigerator on the vacation home. Certainly the family offices we work for do all that, but they're really focused more on a... And
that's the concierge piece that you're really talking about there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the concierge piece?
Yes. Yeah, travel too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the families that we work for have the wealth and scope to which to handle private aviation. And,
sure.
You could do a whole study. Should I be buying my own plane? Should I be going fractional? And every family has different. Every family has a different conclusion when they go through that.
So when you go approach these other companies and they said basically, "Hey, we're the answer for you," you're going to be outsourcing to them, and then they handle whatever areas they handle, and then maybe there's
Yeah, they charge a big fee for not doing a whole lot.
Sure.
And in the end, what they really want is your investments, and they're going to charge big fees on hedge funds, publicly traded securities, muni bonds.
And you guys decided that maybe this makes sense for us to just do it, to form our own group and then become objective.
Yeah, we did.
Because that's what you were missing. You kept saying, these guys are not objective. They're coming to us with the pitch that they're going to help us do all this, but then all of it goes back to them. So you guys wanted to be an objective voice in the market?
Yeah, there's a term in the family office. It's kind of a joke, but it's true that when you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office. That means that every family's needs are so different in scope that there's really no one size fits all box. So when we work with the family on the insource, outsource, first we talk about all the different functionalities that a family office might do.
Yeah.
How are they currently being handled? A lot of family offices, it's a hot term right now, but a lot of them are generated from a privately held business, and then they sell the business, and then the old CFO doesn't have anything to do. And they say, well, what can you handle our affairs? And they say, sure. And they usually have no idea how to do it. But they're smart people usually, and they figure it out. But you really got to figure out which roles are we going to hire people internally to do? Yeah. Which providers are we going to hire? And to do everything in source is really, really expensive. Okay. If you're going to hire your own estate attorney and your own trust and tax person, it can get really, really complex. Some family offices in the $1 billion range have 15 to 20 people, and then you have staffing issues and all sorts of other issues. Other families have a single person that coordinates all of the other advisors, and they have a central place with which to go through. Okay.
All right. So here you guys are. You figured out that there's a hole in the market. Mm-hmm. So what happens next?
So we had 3 families that were recently very liquid, and we said, well, we just went through this ourselves. We'll do a study for you. And for these 3 families, we came up with 3 different answers, none of which involved using an investment bank. The first family wanted something very, very specific, and they wanted to insource everything. So we helped them hire the appropriate people. We still work with that family to help them with some of their estate planning issues. But as far as investments and everything else, they wanted to do that all internally. Another family that had a operating business that they lean on heavily, but it generated a lot of liquidity. And one of their sons had just graduated and was very interested in investment. So they took over within the business construct. The operating real estate company handled the real estate, and then the liquid net worth was handled within that. And then they hired us as a consultant with which to help them make appropriate investments. Okay. And the third family didn't want to pay for the infrastructure of a family office. When push came to shove, they just wanted somebody with our expertise to coordinate all the different advisors and make sure that they were getting top-tier service.
So, Chris, basically what I hear you saying is that you figured out a better way of proposing to families. I mean, thinking about being the independent route, being beholden to one investment bank. So what are some of the pitfalls that you guys began to see in the families reoccurring? What are some of the pitfalls they can maybe avoid by proper planning?
I would say, first of all, the one thing that all families are really concerned about on their hiring their advisors and family businesses is they want somebody who's objective. They don't want to be sold to. They don't want to hire you because they think that you're selling them a product. What do you think, and why do you think that, and what are the experiences? I'll get back to your specific question, but today we still do work for privately held companies as well as the family offices. We didn't give up the privately held companies route. One of the biggest issues that we see that we can control in getting to the 3rd generation, 4th generation, 5th generation is family conflict. Sure. And there are a lot of areas of family conflict, and a lot of them could have been solved by some proper planning. One of the big areas that we have is active versus inactive shareholders in a privately held company, or even in a family office. Sometimes the family office will hire a family member to run it, or the patriarch will be very involved. But if you look at family companies that have any businesses that have hit 100 years, I'm going to try to get around the microphone, but you start with one family line, then you get to 2, then you get to 5. And then at some point, that's going to reset into a single family line, and then it spreads again. So we had a family business for 100 years, but it's not all of the family that came. Some got wealth and were purchased out. And the reason for that is it's very, very difficult for inactive shareholders to exist with active shareholders. Active shareholders want to do simply what's correct for the business long term. They're probably making a pretty decent salary out of the company. Inactive shareholders have this asset that their parents gave them. And they might have been told,
right,
this company is worth $250 million and you're now 1/5 owner. So they have this asset that's worth $50 million, but maybe the company's not paying dividends. So, well, I'm worth $50 million. I'm a teacher, and I'm living in an apartment. Meanwhile, my sister is running the company, successfully, but not successfully enough to pay us dividends, and she's pulling out $1 million salary. What benefit did I get with that asset? And then the active shareholders, meantime, they're like, well, we're trying to grow this business for your kids and the next kids, and if we're paying out cash flow now, I'm not going to be able to make the successful business risks that are going to take this from a 50-year-old company to a 100-year-old company. So there's a pretty big tension between active and inactive shareholders that exists.
Hence why they end up being bought out.
Right. And we would suggest, then there's other issues too. When inactive shareholders want their children to enter the business. So sister's running the company, and then her nephews come into the business.
Right.
And maybe they're great employees, and maybe they're completely valued. Maybe they're not so good. And then what are you going to say to your brother? Yeah, your sons aren't really working out. They're pissing off my CFO. They're not quite capable. They don't want to work on the factory floor. They want the perks of the job of being a family, but they don't want to put in the hard work. So I'm going to let them go. That's not the easiest conversation with which to have, and that becomes a very big point of contention.
I mean, is there any way to really prevent that from happening?
We got to create first you have to create a family policy. Say these are the conditions with which we will hire a family member, if at all. Some families have simply said we're going to keep them out, and then the other issue I'm going to put along with inactives and outlaws. We use the term for in-laws as outlaws. A lot of times an inactive wants their spouse, or an active wants their spouse to come into the company. But you really need a clearly defined set of, this is what you have to do to get to a role that you want to be in. And no, you're not going to come work here for 3 months and be in a position of upper management. And, maybe you're going to have to work in the workforce for 5 years prior. Whatever it is, it has to be specific to each family. But you have to have an ability for the active shareholders and management to be able to terminate an inactive or a family member without causing hard feelings. And, a lot of business owners, they see how it is and they know it has to be done, and they deflect that to upper management. And then the inactives who have votes at board meetings and whatnot, they want to fire the CFO that fired their son. So, but you really, it's got to be a transparent family policy. And you have to hold family members accountable just as you would other employees, maybe even harder. If you're a family member and you wish to go into the family business, you really do need to have a higher standard than any general at-will employee.
Yeah, I would think so.
And oftentimes, these people end up being extremely successful, and they have the capabilities that their grandmother or grandfather had who started the business, and they're able to be a major asset. And when that's the case, it doesn't create conflict. It creates conflict when they don't work out so well.
So they need to create some sort of a policy that everyone agrees on and everyone will follow. Is this just a document that they draft on Word and then they have it amongst themselves? Is there any way to make this legally binding? Like, how serious is this document?
Yeah, we wouldn't think it would be a legally binding document.
Right.
We would just think, I would probably suggest drafting a formal policy statement that is shared to all family members. This is the requirements with which, because there's always going to be exceptions and there's always going to be other issues, but we would suggest drafting a formal document that all family members are aware of. This is what's expected to you before you come in the company. This is what's expected as you work in the company. And this is management's recourse if they don't think you're working out appropriately well. Certainly you don't want to let go family members. It's conflict driven, it's painful, but you don't want to have disruptive family members and either. So maybe you give them another chance in a different division. Maybe they're not set for operations, but they might be good in human resources. But after so many areas, if they just don't have the correct aptitude for the company, and that doesn't mean they can't be successful in other endeavors. if you're running a business, it's a manufacturing plant, and you just have no skill in operations, but maybe you're really good in investments, and you could go conquer the world in Wall Street or in venture. That doesn't mean if you don't make it in the family business, but that it's very painful to get fired from your family business.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So
yeah, the big problem here we're talking about is the inactive versus active shareholders and the involvement there. Let's go back to dealing with somebody who has the $50 million net worth based upon the business, but isn't drawing any income from it. What are some ways to make everyone happy? Like, is there ways to structure shareholders or shares, or what would you recommend to somebody who's walking into that problem?
Well, first, we would recommend that the patriarch or matriarch, and this doesn't always work because the patriarch or matriarch might be gifting a business that's worth $10 million that later became successful that's worth $1 billion.
Sure.
But we would suggest that the patriarch or matriarch or both draft a family mission statement that talks about what the business is for, if it's for community, if it's for employees, it's for our clients, and what we expect the business to do for the family members. Some people might say this business is designed to really help the community and our customers, and if it can provide cash flow, great. But those are our core goals. Others might say, this business is the golden goose for the family, and it's the lifeblood of our family, and we're expecting you to pay out dividends to the ability that you can. But just having the expectation set. We would also suggest that every family have a currency with which every active management company have a currency with which they can buy out inactives.
Okay.
And look, it could be at an extremely discounted value, maybe book value, but inactive family members that are complaining, it can be very, very damaging. And typically people that don't have experience within the business, but they own a part of it, the first thing they're going to point to, because they understand it, is the expenses.
Yeah.
Say, well, you took this guy out to steak dinner, and it was $90 or $900 bottle of wine. And the active's like, yeah, but it's our biggest customer, and he likes $900 bottles of wine, and it produced $30 million of revenue for us last year. And if I don't do that, we're going to lose a customer. But that's usually the first thing that they point to. But then inactives can be very, very damaging depending on the laws of the state. They can demand more financial disclosures. But having an ability with which you can buy them out in the event that it's not working out, either you can take a line of credit from the bank, and it's also a good time. A good partner is your bank, because they'll help you set the value. The value of the company going public is different than what a bank will finance. Okay, so, say our company has a great brand name, and if we decided to go public, it'd be worth $500 million, but on a discounted cash flow basis, it's the bank will loan $150 million. That helps you set the value too, and you have to set expectations. Look, you can hang out for the ride. Company can't afford to pay dividends. We're going to buy you out at this kind of value, and then the inactive at least has an option with which to
get some of that net
to get
worth
some
out.
of that to get to some of the liquidity. And they can sell part or all of their shares, not at the number that they want to, but that's certainly better than owning an asset that doesn't do them any good.
Sure. Now, is there anything that someone who maybe wants to set up a golden goose business, maybe they're an entrepreneur, they say, listen, I want to be able to establish, maybe it's a lifestyle business of sorts. What's a great lifestyle business? What does a great golden goose company look like?
Well,
from an industry standpoint, or even just from
we tend to focus more our history on distribution companies and manufacturing companies.
Okay.
There's a whole nother world right now that's evolving around us, which is the venture focused. We're gonna go to Silicon Valley with the PowerPoint, and we're gonna get $5 million of funding.
Yeah.
That's not really what we do. The companies that we work for are really, really good at generating immediate cash flow, and then they take that cash flow and they either reinvest in the business or they're distributing it out. But I would suggest, one, you have to control your expenses. Two, we're in a world right now. Walmart and Amazon have really done this to
disrupt
us.
Everything.
Is that everyone's demanding better, faster, cheaper.
Right.
So you really have to be able, if you're going to compete with other folks, you really have to be able to control your own costs. There's that term sustainability, which a lot of people say, well, that's completely environmental. And, part of that is being environmentally sound usually means you have better operating processes and procedures. That means I'm controlling the cost of my resource expenditure. So I'd really tell people to focus on the expense. And two, you need to have a visionary. You have to have a vision with what you're doing, and you have to be able to impact that vision.
Yeah.
The visionary doesn't need to have to impact the vision, as long as they can hire someone to do that. But you need to really have a visionary that can push things forward, and that visionary needs to be flexible as market things are changing. But once you get there, and you have that golden goose business, doesn't last forever.
Control expenses is the big one.
Well, right, and diversifying your business lines. There's over a long enough time horizon. There's no company that exists today that's not going to zero. 100 years ago, America was an emerging market. England was the premier. England, the pound was the global currency.
Right.
So there's going to be no country, no company, anything that's going to survive over 100 years. That doesn't mean your family wealth can't, if you make appropriate decisions to diversify.
Well, that goes back to the Berkshire Hathaway model
Yes.
versus like a GM or a Kodak.
Yes.
Okay. Wow, that's great. Lynn, you know Chris pretty well, and you also know family business pretty well. One of the things that we talked about before this interview was your own family's experience with selling their business. What was that like for you, and what were some of the dynamics that went into it?
I have to let you know that I was not too involved with the business,
Mm-hmm.
but it was what sustained my family for sure. My dad had a gas infrared heating company, and he did very, very well. He built it up from nothing and took it to retired a very wealthy man at a very young age. So at the time when things were going well, he's making heaters, he's got reps, selling them all over the country. Somebody a bigger company had come in and asked to buy the company, and he had not given it much thought. And so he had to think about it, and he had 5 children. Well, my mother was his second wife, so 3 of those children were not his by blood, 2 were. And so he had to think about, blood versus non-blood, which changed the dynamics a little bit.
Yeah, big time.
And who was capable and who was interested, and ultimately he just made the decision to sell.
And
I don't think he ever regretted, because a few
Sure.
years later.
well, you guys sold right before the economy tanked,
Yeah,
so it was just a perfect time for your family. Now, you said the dynamics between like step siblings and blood siblings. I mean, that's a big deal. Is there any advice you could give? I know that you were more or less, because of who you were you were one of the kids in that mix. Any advice looking back at maybe someone who's listening might glean something from, maybe a nugget? I guess let me expand on that question. So when you have that decision to make, as opposed to trying to figure out and maybe pushing the kids to take over the business, there was a decision to sell that may or may not have been done if the kids were clamoring to take over. Is that?
Well, we never know if he would have kept on going and with a long-term plan of turning the company over to our generation,
Right.
What would have happened. I mean,
Well, that's
we could have been a client of the Beringer Group. I mean, we were certainly, he was
Yeah.
well on that path. It made sense for him, and I don't think he ever looked back after
Right.
selling. It worked for my family to sell.
Right. Okay. Chris, when you've dealt with situations like this where you've got stepkids and blood children, is there any advice for a small business owner that might be dealing with the same thing? They're trying to figure out what to do with the business. Maybe they're trying to re-cement their vision.
First, have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
From our experience, father time is undefeated. As much as you think you're going to live forever, that's not the reality. But have a plan. Have a plan of how you're going to impact your children and your stepchildren differently, and be transparent about it.
That's
I
good.
know that's a very, very difficult conversation. If Lynn's stepfather, if his opinion was this business is only going on to my bloodline, stepchildren are certainly happy to work there.
Right.
I know that's an extremely, extremely difficult conversation. That's going to make Thanksgiving dinner very, very awkward.
Awkward, yeah.
But the harder conversation would have been if Lynn's stepfather had passed away and given the business to her blood children, and they had to explain to the stepchildren who were working in the company
Right.
why they didn't get ownership. If you don't handle the problems as the business owner and it stays within the family, those problems don't go away. You've just given those problems to your children to handle. And that's really, really not fair to them. It's really an unfair thing. Look, it's unpleasant and it has to be dealt with, and it's going to be dealt with at some point,
Right.
good or bad. And, the family business is really a blessing, but, wealth is also a curse that causes all sorts of conflict and all sorts of problems. And there's a term that we use, fair versus equal. We found that people generally want to be fair, but that doesn't mean you need to be equal. For instance, if you have someone who's working in the business, working really, really hard, they should probably get more ownership, or they should get the vote than people not working in the company. It doesn't mean you don't love the kids not working in the company any less. It just means the ones that you've given more to worked harder, and they deserved it, and that's what you think is fair. Every family has to come to that fair versus equal decision differently. But being equal is not a prerequisite for being fair.
Right. Just from a succession planning standpoint, I know that when there's children that aren't involved in the business, maybe the son takes over, the daughter's doing something else. Father's if he passes away, you can sometimes leverage life insurance to kind of position a sale of the business, so to speak, to one or more of these equity partners, so to speak, whether it's the daughter or the mother, and take care of everyone while letting the son who wants to take over. Talk to us a little bit about how that type of planning fits into this.
Yeah, sure. I know life insurance is a dirty word. People don't want to buy it. They think they can transfer their company easier, but for people that don't really want to do their planning and spend the time, and also there's a lot of business owners that aren't ready to give their company away during lifetime. They're afraid that if they do that, they're going to lose a vote, or they're going to lose their ability to take income. We would tell you, if your business hits a threshold where you're going to own estate tax, any equity that the business owner owns is a liability. You should do everything possible to transfer the equity in lifetime down to your children, grandchildren, via trust vehicles or directly. However the business works.
Okay.
You should be working on that, but in the event that you outright refuse to do that, there's going to be an estate tax due. If you have a partner and then you pass away, how are you going to afford to buy the wife out of the partner that just passed away?
Right.
So you have two owners. One person dies. Now, do you want the unqualified spouse coming in and owning half your company?
Right.
You can certainly impact life insurance in a buy-sell agreement with which to create that currency to get the company shares back to you while providing for the family of the deceased.
Sure. I mean, it's really hard to think of the time of death with your partner that you have the cash flow or cash just sitting around in the business to buy out the spouse, right?
Yep.
But reality is their estate has that ownership share.
Yep.
What happens with the IRS when you have a partner pass away and it's a $20 million business and someone's got $10 million worth of equity in the business? What does that look like from a estate planning problem?
Well, first, after I speak, and I think Lynn can talk a little bit about the estate tax filing process, which is very, very important. But the service is going to value your business, and if you have a spouse alive, you get the exemption. So it's really when it goes to the kids, but they're going to value the business, and there's going to be a tax, which is why we tell you get the equity out of your business now.
Sure.
I know when recessions happen, business owners don't want to deal with planning. All business owners want to deal with is let's get our business back on track. But there was not a better time for 90% of business owners to transfer their company to their children than during the 2008 crisis.
Wow.
Everything's down. Comparables are way down. You can do it at a decreased valuation. It can help you with your gift tax and your exemption. Every crisis brings an opportunity for planning, and it should be looked at. But yeah, the service is going to value your business, and if you haven't planned right, either discounting and moving it or giving other assets to charity, there's going to be an estate tax due.
Yeah.
And you can plan it. There's a lot of strategies you can do lifetime, and for those that don't want to deal with it, term insurance is cheap for when something unexpected happens. And that really is the Band-Aid for people that just don't want to sit down and do a proper plan. Just buy enough term insurance to pay the.
Right.
That's the easy hit by the bus plan. It's not the most effective, not the most impactful, but it puts a Band-Aid on the problem as you're as you
So
do.
at a minimum, somebody should have term insurance on the other partners.
Yeah.
In the event that something happens, at least the money is there. The money just shows up magically. It's tax free, and then money can then be used.
That could be used to purchase the other shares of the deceased family. And then look, if you're married to somebody and then the primary owner passes away, I mean, a lot of people buy second to die. That's a terrible product.
Yeah, I agree.
Because the problem isn't people buy it because it's cheaper, but the problem resides on the person who's running the company. The problem has nothing to do with the spouse.
Right.
The spouse is the one who needs the money when the partner of the company dies. And they're the primary income earner. Then all of a sudden you have no income, and you have half of this business, and the business can't afford to pay you a salary because they have to hire somebody.
Right.
There's a lot of ways around that problem. The quick way for people that just don't want to address it is probably, unfortunately, term insurance. I know no one wants to hear that, but that's the.
No, I think it's a necessity. It's kind of like having insurance on your business.
Yes.
You would not have general liability coverage, so therefore, in the event of a death, it's the same kind of thing. Can you write that cost off with insurance when it's mainly designed for business?
Well, there's certain ways that you can structure that within the company.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have to look at your specific situation, but we could get it as cheap and tax efficiently for you as possible.
So there are pathways based upon how it's all set up.
Yeah, I mean, are you LLC, C Corp? But I mean, it's all variables and depending on how those expenses can run. Lynn is probably more qualified specifically to write on specific tax consequences of a purchase, but if we look at your overall situation, we could find a way with which I don't have to deduct it, but to make it as cheap as possible, to make it a company expense. There's ways to do that.
Something else that I've heard that maybe you can comment on is, if you don't have something like this in place, right, does the IRS get to value your company for you and assign what the estate may or may not owe?
Well, it certainly is going to depend on the company. You're going to have to get your own valuation, and certainly there's valuation experts that are better when you want to sell your company as opposed to when you transfer it.
Mm-hmm.
Valuation is art, not a science.
Right.
But you're going to have to provide your own evaluation, and if the IRS said this is bunk, you're going to have to defend it vigorously well. So we would suggest, there's a lot of really, really good valuation experts that can help you when you get to that point. But all your illiquid assets, if they're sizable enough, you're going to have to defend a valuation if the IRS decides to audit.
Wow, that's no good. All right, something else that we discussed that I wanted to bring up, and it's probably good for our listeners, is really dealing with just conflict in general. I mean, obviously we've talked about some structures that can be put in place to aid in transferring wealth and everything else. But what have you just seen time and time again within the families bickering maybe? Anything any tidbits you could help a owner who sees that happening within their own company?
Yeah, well, first, this is an interesting one. A lot of owners are reluctant to give up control, and we call it the Prince Charles effect. With people living older, we have Prince Charles is never going to be king. Maybe he's 70 years old. His mother's still alive. We have 90-year-old business owners running the company, and not only are they physically healthy, they're sharp in the head still. Medical technology has gone a long way, and that top generation really does not, especially the founder of the business, doesn't want to give up control, and that can cause some resentment for kids who are in the business who want to take it over, and then they end up retiring before they ever get to control the business. There's not a lot you're going to do about that, but we would suggest transparency is key. We would suggest at some point the patriarch or matriarch, founder of the business, writes a family mission statement. A family mission statement is going to say, this is what I did. These are our values. This is how we want the company to benefit our family, to benefit the employees, to benefit the community. And these are my wishes, granddad, grandmom. And, we found when this document exists, 50 years down the road, somebody might have a beef with something. And then the people who are running the business say, well, this is our family mission statement, and we're operating the company exactly as grandfather wanted it to be operated, and we have his document. The very least, if you're not going to take the time to do that, as we said, problems don't go away of conflict. They don't go away. They can be deferred. A lot of business owners want to deflect them. They want to run their business. But if you don't deal with them, the next generation is going to have to deal with them. And if you're not going to take the time to write your family mission statement, it was just the bare minimum. You attach a letter with your will explaining why you gave what you gave.
Right.
This is where you can get into fair versus equal, saying, we know we gave this family member more ownership in the company than this family member, and we gave them this asset instead of this asset. This is why I did what I did. So one, at least they understand where it's coming from. Just going to hear, this is how the assets are distributed. Well, why? I don't understand why mother did it that way. I have no understanding whatsoever. It can create a sense of resentment, one, to your deceased parent, which is really, really bad, and two, to the person that got something that you felt that you deserved. An explanation, they still might hate their deceased parent, but at least they'll know that this is why you made these wishes. I wasn't impacted or manipulated by your brother or sister. This was my will and my desire.
That's good. Yeah, I think if there's one key takeaway, it's to put it in paper and make sure everyone understands the purpose behind why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, our key takeaway would be to have a plan.
Yeah.
If you don't have if you don't want to deal with it, you have a hit by the bus plan. Have something simple. It's like bringing an umbrella to the golf course. Hopefully it doesn't rain and you don't need it. But if you're not really gonna address these issues, have a plan and have that level of transparency with your children, with your spouse. We have business owners that they don't share with their spouse how much they're taking on the company. It's amazing, and it's that lack of transparency. Sometimes you don't want to share stuff; it's very, very uncomfortable. But as stated in the conversation line we've been going on, these problems are not going to go away. They're just going to get deferred to somebody else.
Right.
One of the things you were sharing with Corbin before the podcast was how you and your family have a family business meeting once a week. Yeah. And I thought that was really powerful, and I think it's something I would like to institute at Killingsworth Spencer with Janet and me and our families. Yeah,
that's very powerful. All my brothers work in the company to some degree. We all do different things. I'm running the operating business. My other three brothers do fit in different areas, but every week my father, myself and my brothers, we get together and we talk about things that we're doing for the business. We talk about things that we could be doing more, we could use help from, and we have a full understanding of what everybody is doing on a weekly basis. We don't have employee or management as part of this. It's just purely family-related business issues.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, just to staying in touch like that. We had an episode with Al Saposnik just a little bit ago, talking about his family-run business, and it was generations were there. And I can only imagine if they'd had the weekly meetings and everyone was talking about stuff, there was some of the conflict that he went through would have been different. But
yeah, the one challenge I would tell anybody when they start that, be very thoughtful and focused how you can facilitate the first couple of meetings.
Sure.
Talking over each other doesn't do anyone any benefit. We like to go, the way that we structure our meetings is we read our family mission statement, our business company mission statement, and then we ask each individual, what they've done well, what they didn't do well, and if they're open to feedback from other family members.
Wow.
And then at the end.
It's really organized, Chris.
And then, we'll have a facilitator too, have a specific topic. If, my one brother is in the real estate side of the company,
okay.
And he might tell us to look into comps or review opportunity zones and give us a brief reading before it, and then he'll go walk through that specific area.
That's great. So really and truly, you need to have some structure around the meeting. Otherwise,
if you don't have structure around the meeting, obviously as you're going through these, you're going to have disagreements, but you don't want to start the meeting off with a disagreement, right? I mean, right. You want everyone to get their say in, and you want it to be very formulative and
I love that you guys start with the company mission statement.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about framing it the right way from the get-go. That's great. Well, I'm gonna wrap us up here. Lynn, were there any key insights that you pulled away that you might want to reiterate for someone listening?
I think if you have a family a business, that you have a blessing, and a blessing to pass on to your children. It may be wealth, it may be knowledge, it may be extra family time. I mean, I cherish the time I get to spend with my own children, working with me. So and anything that we have that's good has to be nurtured. So it's worthwhile to treat it well.
That's great. And Chris, obviously we had a key takeaway with get a plan, have a plan, maintain a plan. But I think that last little tidbit you shared about your own family meetings is probably critical to have structure. And the way you mentioned how you structured it was, I hope someone takes that away with them today. 'Cause that was
I'm
important.
taking that away from
Yeah, I
today.
was gonna say someone's gonna take that away. That was pretty powerful.
Every family has different structures, and the other thing for people that aren't as active, and you have active, inactive shareholders, maybe even semi-annual structured board meetings or family meetings are important.
One of the things that you mentioned, throughout the time period we've been talking is the mission statement. You've mentioned it as far as your own family mission statement, but also within some of the clients that you've worked with, and of course with some of the more patriotical, creating the vision for the family going forward. Talk to us a little bit about what that means, and maybe if there's an owner listening right now who hasn't really crafted a good mission statement yet, what goes into that, and what have you seen in your experience?
We don't have a template for a family mission statement. It's very unique and specific to every family. We can help. Henry Phipps, who started Bessemer Trust, wrote a one-page letter to each of his children, and that in every office of Bessemer Trust across the country, that letter is displayed in the office. But things that are common across most business owners that we work with, how do we want this business to impact the family, which we've talked a lot about, but more importantly, how do we want you, the family, to impact philanthropy? How do we want the business to help our employees?
Yeah,
that's very, very critical. Most business owners have a strong desire and a strong connection to the people that help, especially first-generation business owners, have a very strong connection to the people who've been working on the shop floor, people who've been with them for 40 years. And how does this business impact community? You might put in the family mission statement, you are never to sell this company to a private equity group if they're going to take the core plan out of our town. I mean, you might have a company where the whole town is supportive on this company, and it might be the parents' wish that if you do wish to liquidate the company at some point in the future, you're not taking the jobs away. It just means too much. So it really, how does the wealth impact ourselves, our family, our community, our employees? They might talk about the customer. If you treat the customer and your vendors right, it's just a sense of morality and how you do things. Just about the way that you want things run, the way that we ran it. Certainly you can be flexible and amend the family mission statement as the world changes. But there's so much that goes into it. Yeah. And it's really something, a matriarch or a patriarch should not just sit down and scribble a couple notes and give it on. It's something that should take a lot of thought. We've worked with clients, and we've sent probably 30, 40 drafts back and forth with our feedback and really getting into what they want, over the course of a year before they're finally ready to share it with their family. I mean, this is a governing document that you want the shareholders of your company and your family members and how you want this run from your perspective for the next 50, 100, 150 years. And it's very, very important, and it's very important to be thoughtful. And there are so many areas and so many different things, and so many different people that your family business is probably impacting. Right. And I started this company with a vision, with an idea, and it touches so many different people in this way now, and this is how I want it to touch those people going forward. Wow.
All right. Well, Chris Beringer from the Beringer Group. That's pretty powerful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Corbin.
Guys, I hope that someone took away some great stuff today. Obviously our goal was to really hone in on the family-run business, but also to help everyone understand that whether it's a family-run business or not, you should have a plan. You never know what's going to happen in life, and you leave work on Friday and something happens to you over the weekend. What happens on Monday if you're not there and capable of opening the doors? And if you don't know the answer to that, you should have a plan. So that's a big takeaway for me anyway. Thank you again so much, and thanks for joining us for another podcast for the Profit Minded Business. Have a great week.